A short toll of the bell rolled across the valley, and the black banner fluttered in the wind at the county gate, like a simple rag. But everyone immediately understood. A foreign game had begun, in which the poor are usually assigned the role of silent witnesses. Hello, friends. I'm glad you're with me. Tell me where you're watching this video from. Write about it in the comments. I'm really interested. I hope you enjoy listening. Part 1. Agatha, the laundress, carried a bundle of laundry to the river, staring at her hands the whole time. They were strong and sinewy, with white scars from lye. She was accustomed to thinking of these scars as a map of her life. The line on her left thumb appeared on the day her mother fell by the hearth, and said that her heart felt like a hook in her chest. The scar on her right wrist was left after she rescued someone else's child's dress from a fire in the bathhouse. That same year, Count Thibault's son rode by for the first time on a gray mare, not looking at the people on the side of the road. Agatha had the same light gray eyes as Count Remigius, and many in the village said that those eyes were related to pride and fatigue, not blood. No one said this out loud, but the old herbalist crossed herself when she met her, and whispered that this was how nature liked to leave notes. In the mornings, Agatha did laundry in the castle laundry room, and returned in the evening to a low hut on the edge of the forest, where her mother and younger brother Jean lived. Jean, thin and quick, worked for the stableman, and in the village they whispered that he was nimble not only with belts and buckles. He was disliked for his laughter and for knowing the shortcuts. He responded to gossip with silence and told his mother that everything would work out if he kept his head down and his feet moving. The village market was bustling during the fair. A salt merchant named Lothar came twice a year. He brought gray salt in sacks, measured it with a simple tin mug, and always gave generously. He paid for lodging in advance, painted his cart rims with resin, and avoided talking about business. People only knew that he had a wide network of acquaintances and a paper with the royal seal in an oak chest. No one had seen this paper, but the rumor held fast, like knitting yarn. On the day the black flag was raised at the county gate, Agatha was already walking toward the castle with her baskets. The courtyard was full of people. Squires were arguing about a saddle, the cook was carrying out a pot of soup, and the weaver's grandson was chasing chickens. Hugo, the steward, tall, thin, with a straight beard, beckoned to Agatha and told her to take the linen from Countess Elena's room. He said it was urgent because the Countess was going to pray in the chapel and demanded clean linen. His voice was as if he were measuring grains rather than words. In the Countess's bedroom, Agatha saw folded sheets and a soft fur cloak on the bed. A thin, expensive shawl lay on the carpet. Agatha's trained eye noticed a fresh wine stain at the edge, resembling a stream map, and tiny brown dots on the hem, like those left by etching water used to clean silver. She noted this in her mind, as one notes something unimportant but strange. When she lifted the top sheet, A narrow bundle tied with black ribbon fell out of the fold. Inside was a small piece of coarse woolen cloth, sewn together from 3 strips like a pathetic flag. The color was a deep black, dense, as if it had soured. Next to it was a scrap of parchment with an ink mark that looked like a bird's footprint. It was the most ordinary everyday trifle, someone else's bundle in a laundry basket. But at that moment, Agatha felt a chill rise to her shoulders. She thought that someone wanted to hide the evidence. She didn't scream. The bundle went to the bottom, under her cloak, and Agatha carried the baskets to the river. Halfway there, she turned toward the forest, where the path was secluded and rarely used. She untied the ribbon. The stitching in the corner of the flag was rough and protruded with sparse stitches, as if sewn by a hand accustomed to bags rather than thin fabric. Letters appeared on the parchment. They were not words, but numbers. Agatha could count, but she could barely read. She saw repeating rows of symbols, like in the grain records. 3 tens, then 50, then another row, and next to it was a mark that looked like half a sun disk. Everything was written in the same black ink that left a dry mark on her fingers. Agatha hid the bundle in an ash bag. From that moment on, the world became quieter. She noticed how Steward Hugo put his hand on the hilt of his dagger when 2 peasants passed by. She noticed how Countess Alina handed the key to the maid, her eyes red, but her face expressionless. She noticed Count Thibault's son linger at the laundry room door and say that the white sheets were delightful. He said it without laughter, but emphasized his words like a knife. In the evening, in the hut, her mother asked why Agatha was late. Agatha replied that there was a lot of laundry. Her mother began to stir the soup, but soon sat down on a stool, leaned on the table, and began to breathe rapidly. Agatha put a log on the fire and thought she should go to the herbalist. Jean ran in from outside, smelling of horses, and said that there was a black flag at the gate, that people in town were whispering about arrears and new taxes for the war, that the steward had ordered the carts and measures to be rewritten, as if machines and numbers decided who would live. He also said that the seal had disappeared from the small bridle in the stable, and the groom was swearing, although it could have simply been lost. At night, Agatha took out the bundle, unfolded the flag, and placed her palm on it. The fabric was rough, but the dye did not fade even in water. This meant that it had been dyed with expensive soot or oak gall. Such things could not be bought in the settlement. She thought about the black banner at the gate, the dark spots on the bottom of the decanter, the parchment with numbers next to which the sign of a half-disc loomed. The half-disc reminded her of the stamp on Merchant Lotar's salt bags, a wide semicircular seal that he put on paper when the money was paid and the goods had crossed the ferry. The morning began with a shout. Steward Hugo ordered the people to gather in the courtyard. He said that the Count's malachite box with several small seals had disappeared and that the castle workers' homes needed to be searched. He said that if someone had stolen it, the Count would be merciful if the item was returned before sunset. He added that this mercy should be understood correctly. He said this as calmly as if he were reading a list of supplies, but many people's hands were sweating profusely. The search reached Agatha's hut. They found an ash bag and a black ribbon inside it. They did not find the flag because it was not in the bag. Agatha had cut open the straw mat at night and hidden the fabric inside. The steward picked up the ribbon with 2 fingers and said that it resembled the one used to tie up signs of rebellion. Agatha's mother turned pale, and Jean clenched his teeth. The steward ordered Jean to be taken to the courtyard. He talked a lot about the penalties for non-payment of duties and about helping the crown. His voice remained even. Agatha did not argue. She took an empty basket and went to the market. The merchant Lothar was just spreading out his tarpaulin. He saw Agatha and said she had soot on her cheek. He handed her a rag, then quietly said that the black flag at the gate was usually raised when the county took more grain than it was entitled to, or when a house was burned down. He said he had seen such flags in other places, and that they rarely came down on their own. Agatha asked if it was sometimes convenient to untie other people's knots. Lothar replied that sometimes it was profitable. She said she had found a bundle with a black ribbon in the laundry, inside which was a piece of dark cloth and a parchment with rows of numbers and a mark similar to his seal. Lothar froze. He said that the half-disc was not his seal, but a sign from an old contract for transporting salt by river. The half-sun means in transit, and is put on the list when the cargo has not yet been sent to the crossing. He said it was the sign of the Transporters' Guild, and if it had ended up with the Countess, it meant that someone was passing papers through her room that did not belong there. Agatha asked Lothar to find a reason to enter the castle. He said he had an old, unfinished bill for salt consumed by the castle. He said he could ask the steward to confirm the debt note. He said that this would give him the right to be present when the debts were recorded in the book. He said that if the book was opened, the guild's seal would show its mark, and it would be possible to compare the numbers on the parchment. By evening, Jean was being held in the guardhouse. Servants brought water, and children watched from a distance. The steward was going to hold court in the morning. This court in the county always looked the same. A long table with knife scratches and breadcrumbs on it, the count in a high chair, the countess next to him with keys on her belt. Below them, the steward with light parchments, the priest with a prayer book, 2 knights of the court, whose eyes rarely rose to the faces of the peasants. The secretary took notes, and these notes were then bound and placed in a chest. There they lay until the next trouble began. Agatha spent the night by the fire. Her mother was silent. In the silence, she finally said that Agatha had the Count's eyes. She added that many years ago, Count Remigius had come to the kitchen late, when the castle was celebrating a successful hunt. She said that he was young and drunk at the time, and then brought a sack of flour into the house. She said that since then he had never looked her in the eye. Agatha listened and was not surprised, because she had known for a long time. But that night, the words fell like stones. not as a complaint, but as a statement of fact. In the morning, the merchant Lothar came to the gate with a chest and 4 porters. He told the gatekeeper that he was going to court to confirm an old debt. He showed a parchment with the ink seal of the castle chancellery, on which there was indeed a half circle and some kind of mark next to it, rubbed off by fingers. The gatekeeper called the steward. The latter smiled crookedly, but let him through. Lothar entered the hall and stood in the shadows, where the table was visible. The trial began with dry words. Steward Hugo said that John was suspected of stealing the seal and the sign of rebellion, that his family had been found with the ribbon used to tie such signs, that he often disappeared at night and knew the trails. He said that this was punishable by 6 strokes of the rod and branding, and if his participation in raising the black banner was confirmed, then a fine of grain. Jean stood pale, but his back was straight. He said he had taken neither the seal nor the banner. He added that on the night the seal disappeared, he had been working with a deck of cards in the stable because the water had become muddy. The steward said that sounded convenient. Agatha raised her hand and asked to speak, as if asking for water. She was allowed to do so. She approached the table and asked the Countess for the cloak she had picked up from the laundry yesterday. The Countess nodded to the maid. Agatha carefully laid the cloak on the table, ran her finger along the hem, and said that there were fresh spots from the silver polish used to clean cutlery and occasionally seals. She said that such spots appear if the edges of seals and tin stamps are touched. She pointed to a thin trail of wine stains on the sheet and added that someone had been walking with a bowl and pulled the fabric, then wine spilled, and someone tried to wash the stain with water. She asked the secretary to bring a wooden basin and a clean rag. She dipped the corner of the cloak into the water, and the water darkened slightly, but did not change color. The dye was resistant. She said that it had been dyed with an expensive dye available only to castle dyers, and that such dyeing was not available in the village. She said that whoever had hidden the bundle with black ribbon had access to the castle. Otherwise, where would he have gotten fabric that did not fade in the river? The steward said that the laundress talked too much. The priest said that truth did not depend on status. The Countess asked where the laundress got the marks on her hands, which looked like cuts from a drum. Agatha replied that they were work marks and advised looking at their location. They appear on those who turn heavy rollers, not because of their job, but out of habit. She added that the same stripes can be seen on the left hand of the castle dyer, Roland. The maid brought the Countess's cloak, and the light fell on the hem. Lothar coughed from the shadows and asked permission to present the bill. He said that a few months ago the castle had stopped paying for salt, which was recorded in the debt book lying on that very table. He explained that, according to the agreement of the Transporters' Guild, a half-sun symbol was placed on the list when the cargo was still in transit, and a full sun when it arrived. He said that his document had a half-sun on it, even though the salt had long since been in the castle and distributed to the kitchen, laundry, and stables. He said that this meant that someone had deliberately kept the debt in a in-transit state in order to increase the fees and write off part of it. He asked the steward to open the debt book. The steward replied that the merchant had no right to demand such things. The priest said that any debt owed to people was a debt owed to God, and the book must be opened for evidence. The count nodded, and the secretary brought a thick book. The pages smelled of dust and finger grease. Lothar ran his finger over a row of marks. In the column "Salt," it said 3 dozen, then 50. Next to it was a half-sun and a signature that looked like a pulled rope. Agatha took the parchment she had found in the laundry out of her bag. She held it up to the book. The symbols matched like a key in a lock. Count Remigius looked at the rows of numbers and the black flag visible through the window. He looked tired. He said he wanted to know who had signed the documents. The steward said that the secretary had kept the records, but that he had signed them by virtue of his position. The secretary turned pale and said that he had only written the dates and amounts. He said that the steward brought the sheets already half-filled. He added that before each entry, the steward would go into the countess's room on the pretext of checking the fabrics and how they were drying, and then leave her room and go to the tables. He said that he was afraid to speak because he had children. Jean raised his head and said that the stable seal had not disappeared from him, but from the entrance to the bathhouse, where it was hung on a nail when the straps were changed. He said he found a strip of black paint on the ground, similar to the paint used to paint the banners. He said that on that night he saw a shadow standing by the laundry room door, holding some kind of bundle in its hands. He said he thought it was a thief, but the shadow went into the dyer's room. He said he wanted to say something, but they stopped him, because no one listens to someone they consider crazy and light on his feet. Steward Hugo smiled. He said that the boy's testimony could not be relied upon. Lothar asked the count to pay attention to one more thing. He said that the black flag at the gate was sewn from 3 strips of coarse wool of different densities, but dyed in the same durable way. He said that this was possible if the dyer had access to a large vat and kept the fabric in it for a long time, until it was completely saturated. He added that there were no such vats in the village, but there were some in the castle. He said that the signs on the parchment with the half-sun were hidden in the countess's linen, which meant that someone had used her room as a safe passage. He said that it did not matter to him who it was. What mattered to him was duty. But the truth was important to everyone. Countess Elena quietly folded her hands. She said that she always kept the key to her room on her belt, but last night the steward had asked to borrow it for a moment, on the pretext of checking the box with spare seal ribbons. She said she had returned the key to its usual place without checking the box. She said that at dawn she had noticed small spots on the marble slab that looked like silver water. She said she had remained silent because she was afraid of causing a scandal. And now she realized that it was her silence that had become a chain for others. Steward Hugo looked at everyone with an even gaze. He said he was doing what was necessary for the county. collecting taxes for the crown, and saving salt when salt was being wasted. He said that the black flag at the gate was a child's game that someone had arranged to confuse people before collecting the new tax. He said that he had been working for years and did not care what the laundresses and merchants thought. He said he was ready to confirm the records with any seal. He raised his hand, but at that moment the door flew open and a messenger entered with a bundle of parchments. He said that a crowd had gathered at the gate, and the abbot of the abbey was asking to be let into the hall. He added that the abbot had a letter from the capital, with a large seal in his hands. The abbot entered slowly. He said that he recognized the count's right to collect taxes, but he had received systematic complaints about double duties and hidden debts. He said that the royal chancellery had sent an inspector who would arrive in 2 weeks, and in the meantime, the abbot had the right to demand a temporary inventory of property and debts in order to compare them. He said he would dictate the procedure. The debt book would be opened, the letters would be recounted, and the seals would be checked. He said that punishments would be postponed for the time being. He also said that the abbey had a teacher who knew how to verify ink by its composition. The steward turned pale for the first time. He said he would not allow the monks to teach him his business. Lothar placed his chest on the table. He said that it contained a debt note from the county, which he had bought from another merchant 3 years ago. He said that this document bore the count's signature and a small note indicating a past personal loan to a woman from the castle kitchen. He said that this loan had been repaid on the birthday of the girl with gray eyes. He said this calmly. The hall fell silent. The count closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. He said that many years ago, when he was young, he had committed a transgression for which he had not atoned. He said he had compensated for it with torment and silence, when he should have told the truth. He said he could see the laundress with his eyes before him. He said he did not know how to make amends now, but he knew that the steward had taken advantage of his weakness and hidden his affairs in her shadow. The secretary turned over several pages and said that the steward's signatures did indeed repeat with the same slant and the same length of the line in the letter T. He said that the ink on some of the entries was darker, meaning they had been written recently, even though they were dated earlier years. The abbey teacher ran a drop of water along the line and said that the ink composition was different. He said it was a forgery. Jean, whom everyone considered crazy, suddenly stepped forward and placed a small strip of leather with a metal ring on the table. He said he found it under a step in the bathhouse. He said it was a holder for a stable seal. He said that if you moved the third stone at the bottom corner, there was a gap where small things could easily be hidden. He said that this gap had been used for a long time because the stone was polished. He added that people often underestimate those who know about gaps. Someone in the room snorted, but no one laughed. The count said that the trial would continue after the inspection. He said that Jean would be released for the time being, and the steward would be temporarily deprived of his keys and required to remain under guard. He said that the laundress, Agatha, and the merchant Lothar were admitted to the verification as witnesses. He said that the black banner at the gate would only be removed after the people received an explanation. He spoke softly, without loud words. His shoulders were heavy. When the hall emptied, Agatha went out into the courtyard. The air was clean, free of salt dust. Jean walked beside her, his fingers trembling. Her mother sat in the shade and quietly watched the children. Lothar leaned against a column and nodded to Agatha. He said that money loves order, but sometimes order only comes after someone breaks the old rules. He said he didn't consider himself a benefactor. He just knew how the debt chain worked and sometimes pulled on it at the right moment. In the evening, someone carefully unfolded a piece of paper in the market square. Inside was a heavy silver spoon engraved with a half-sun symbol and a small scrap of paper. Many hands had held this spoon, but only one had washed it in lye water. It was a strange gift and a silent challenge. End of Part 1. Part 2. The next day, quiet work began. The abbot took sheet after sheet from the debt book, placed a bottle of water next to it, sometimes scraped off ink crumbs, whispered to himself, and wrote down simple words. Old, new, matched, didn't match. Lothar took his notes out of the chest and checked the dates. The secretary brought lists of sacks of salt, canvas, iron, and candles. He rubbed his nose because his eyes were tired. Agatha stood by the window and clasped her hands when her thoughts became confused. The steward was guarded by 2 of the Count's men. He sat upright, as always. He admitted nothing, only repeating that he was defending the estate. In the evening, a group of peasants came to the gate. They did not shout. They showed their broken pitchforks and cracked palms. One old man told the abbot that this year they had given more grain than last year, but the bread was worse because the flour had been mixed with husks. He said he knew what honest flour smelled like, and this smelled bitter. He said they had raised the black flag not for war, but to be heard. He said they were tired of fearing for their children, because they did not know how to feed them in winter. The abbot listened, nodded, and took notes. He said he would collect lists and compare them with the steward's book. He said the old man should bring a sack of flour and show how it poured. The next day, the old man came with a sack. The flour was gray and contained hard grains that crunched when bitten. The abbot's teacher said that these were husks and chaff, which were added to the flour to increase its weight. He said that flour made from such flour was hard on the stomach. He said that this was done by those who wanted to meet their quotas and did not think about the people. Meanwhile, Agatha brought a broken wooden drum from the laundry room that had long needed repair. She said there were traces of dark paint on the drumstick, the same as on the black banner. She said that the drum was rarely taken out into the hall, but last week the steward himself had come to watch the laundry being done and had picked up the pegs. She said he had new scars on his fingers as if he had recently been burned by lime. She put the drum on the table and showed the line of paint. The Abbey teacher applied a piece of woven flag to the trail. The thread caught a couple of crumbs, and the color matched. The Count ordered the dyer, Roland, to be summoned. He came, bowed low, and spoke quickly. He said that he had dyed the fabric on the steward's orders. At night, when it was quiet in the courtyard, and that it was practice fabric for banners, which needed to be tested for durability. He said he was paid in cash, not through the books. He said he thought it was military training, because the steward had mentioned a possible inspection from the capital and the need to show order. He said he gave the steward black tape to tie up the bundles, and that the tape was kept in the Countess's chest because it was dry and clean there. He said he obeyed the order without question because he was afraid of losing his job. Lothar asked permission to ask Roland a question. He asked why the seam on the edge of the flag was not done by a dyer, but by someone else's hand. Roland said that he did not know how to sew, and that a maid whose name he did not know had sewn it. He said that the steward had brought him the finished strips and taken them away in the morning. While the quarrel was going on in the hall, it became noisier in the courtyard. People brought their little notes. Some had their chickens taken away. Some had their bridge tolls raised. Some had a day's work taken away for the castle, even though that person had already worked it off. The abbot listened and put pebbles into 2 bowls. One meant private, the other common trouble. The bowl of common trouble quickly grew heavier. Jean walked among the people and told them not to crowd or shout, because then the guards would get nervous and reach for their swords. They believed him with surprising ease. He spoke briefly and to the point. He had previously been considered an empty-headed lad, but now he stood like a man at work. It turned out that an underestimated person was better at keeping order than a senior guard who liked to shout. Towards noon, something strange happened. The castle maid Adeline came to the laundry room with a basket of laundry and asked Agatha to check a stain on a white shirt. Agatha saw that the stain was not from wine or etching water, but from spilled candle wax, thin and fragrant. Such wax was used in the office, where candles were melted down. Inside the shirt, she found a tiny iron plate, a piece of a signet ring with a tiny tooth. Agatha realized that it was a fragment of the very same stable seal. Someone carried the fragment with them in their underwear as a talisman or a spare key. And the shirt was not just any shirt, but that of a secretary. There was a microscopic stitch on the collar, which the secretary used to mark his belongings, so that they would not be confused. Agatha said nothing, and simply wrapped the plate in one of her rags, the kind that no one takes. She went into the hall. The secretary was sitting at his desk, writing. There was indeed a mark on his neck, where the collar of his shirt usually lay. Agatha placed the plate on the edge of the desk and said she had found it by the soap. The secretary turned pale and said that the small seal had disappeared a week ago, but he was afraid to say anything. He said he was ashamed. He said that the steward was in the room at the time, and someone else had left bread and butter crumbs on the table, which is not done in the office. He said he saw the steward wiping his hands with a rag that smelled strongly of bleach. He said he thought it was a coincidence, but now he understands that it is a chain. The abbot said that was enough. He announced that the steward was being suspended and that his property would be sealed until the arrival of the royal inspector. He said that Jean was cleared of suspicion. He said that Lothar's debt would be recognized and repaid in grain as soon as the ban was lifted. He said that the black flag at the gate was hung legally as a sign of misfortune, but it would be taken down when the protocol was ready. He said that the people could disperse. Then the steward Hugo stood up. He said he would not allow his honor to be trampled on. He said that if they did not believe his words, then let them believe his strength. He said he had his own guards. He whistled. 4 mercenaries, whom Hugo kept on his own money, entered the hall from the courtyard. They were wearing leather jackets and carrying short spears. They exchanged glances and paused at the threshold. Agatha noticed one of them glance at Lothar. Perhaps they knew the merchant. Perhaps they knew his stall. It was a moment when family drama mixed with danger. Everyday life became a thriller, because one wrong move could lead to bloodshed. At that moment, the one who had been considered unimportant came in handy again. Jean, who was standing by the door, rushed to the deck at the edge of the hall, pulled out the wooden wedge that held the lid in place, and knocked it over. Water gushed out of the pile, heavy and icy. It covered the mercenaries' feet, and the floor became slippery. The men recoiled. Lothar grabbed his chest and retreated to the wall. The abbot raised his hand. The count tapped his staff on the floor. The mercenaries looked at each other in confusion. One slipped and fell, hitting his elbow. The others hesitated. During this pause, the count's guards stepped forward and pushed the steward's men against the wall. There were no cries. There was a lot of water, wet leather straps, and cold feet. The steward realized that the moment had been lost. He tried to leave. Lothar stopped him. The merchant said he had another document, an old deed for a house in the lower town, registered in Hugo's name. He said the house had been bought with money withdrawn from the castle's account under the pretext of repairing a bridge. He said this was evident from the identical numbers and letters in 2 different books, because the steward wrote his letters in a recognizable way. In the letter R, he always had a tail longer than others. He said that anyone with straight eyes could see this. Hugo looked at Lothar with hatred. He said that the merchant was a worse thief than he was because he stole legally. He said that they were all the same, just some of them wore clean shirts. He said he would remember this day. He was taken into custody. In the evening, by order of the count, a notice was posted at the gate. Until the arrival of the inspector, the steward would be replaced by a temporary administrator, the abbot, and the debt book would be opened daily after morning service. The notice was written in large, simple letters. People came to read it. They did not smile, but their shoulders relaxed. Agatha, meanwhile, sat by the river and did laundry. She wasn't thinking about the steward. She was thinking about what the Count had said about youth and keeping one's word. She thought that the truth doesn't change the past, but it does change the way you breathe. Her mother fell asleep that evening without suffering. Jean smiled the way people smile when they are no longer considered empty. On the third day, the Countess came into the hall. She brought a casket with ribbons. She said she wanted it opened in front of witnesses. The casket was heavy, with iron corners. Inside were ribbons, needles, spools of thread, and a small bundle of tiny parchments. On them were written the sums that the Countess had secretly given to the servants when she saw that they were in trouble. She said it was her fault that she had helped quietly, so as not to stir up the house, but that this only hid the general hunger. She said that on the day the seal disappeared, the steward took the ribbons and notes from her. She said she returned them when she heard the footsteps of the inspectors. She said she was ready to speak openly. It was simple and even. Lothar listened and smiled slightly. He told Agatha that sometimes an unexpected benefactor is not the one who throws a bag of coins, but the one who brings order and says, "Let's count." He said that he is often hated for this simplicity, but without it there is no air. The inspector from the capital arrived a week later. He listened, picked up the papers, and wrote down that the steward had falsified the records, that the debt to Lothar was acknowledged and would be paid off with salt and grain until the new harvest, that the peasants would be given back 2 tithes of grain that had been taken in excess, and that the house in the lower town would be confiscated in favor of the county, and a workshop would be opened there. He wrote that the dyer Roland would be punished with labor and inspections, but would remain in his position because he knew how to die, and would now die according to lists. He wrote that the secretary would remain because he had told the truth. Count Remigius went out to the people and said that he had not shirked his responsibility, but had not seen the grain leaving his chest. He said that now he saw, and that his silence had been a convenient cover. He said that he ordered the laundry to be relieved of some of its work, because the people there bent over before the others. He said he wanted to remember this day and this banner. He said he was not raising his sword, but raising his eyes. It sounded not lofty, but simple. Then he approached Agatha. He said he knew who she was. He said that the offer of a guilty plea was not a gift. He said he could offer her a room in the castle and money, but he knew that this would not erase the years. He said he would give her the field by the river, which had been taken from the widow this year for debt. He said that it was now registered to Agatha, and another tithe to her mother, with the right of inheritance. He said that this was a deal, not a favor. She had told the truth in court and kept her voice steady. She had saved not only her brother, but also the accounts. He said that the county paid for work. Agatha nodded. She said she would not live in the castle. She said she would take the field because the field was bread. She said she would not stop washing because clean cloths were needed after dirt. She said she didn't want to be called the Count's daughter. She said that if anyone asked why she had gray eyes, she would say, "That's just how it turned out." She said she didn't want her life to become someone else's legend. That was simple, too. Jean got a job as an assistant to the gatekeeper because he had a good sense of the crowd. He, who was considered empty-headed, was placed next to the gate, and he quickly learned to see who was coming with a knife and who was coming with a question. He helped people enter and exit, sometimes quietly telling them that the court would be in session tomorrow, and that today the doors were closed. He was respected. He no longer ran around aimlessly, but if necessary, he knew how to find a shortcut for those who couldn't wait. Merchant Lothar left after 2 weeks. He said he would return in the spring. He said he liked order in records and clear signatures. He said that this time he was paid not with coins, but with trust, and that was a rare commodity. He told Agatha that if she ever needed people from far away, she could write him a note on parchment, a half-sun, next to the letter L. He said he had long threads. He didn't smile broadly, but his eyes were bright. The black banner was not taken down immediately. It was taken down not because it was ordered, but because a new board appeared on the gate. On it, simple signs were burned into the order of flour distribution, deadlines, names of those responsible, and days for people from distant farms. People knew when and to whom to go. The banner was carefully folded and taken to the guardhouse. Inside, it retained the smell of smoke and water. It had been sewn when trouble was brewing and left behind when the trouble became apparent. A month later, the river was crowded. Girls were washing clothes. Boys were chasing sticks in the shallows. Agatha squatted and rubbed lye into coarse fabric. She had a new scar on her finger. She told herself in simple words that truth is always made up of little things. A drop of candle wax on the collar of a shirt, a thin trail of etched water on the hem, a half-sun mark on the numbers in a book, an iron plate on a bar of soap, the smell of a dye bath, a polished stone in a bathhouse. She thought that these things were not usually given a voice, but sometimes they spoke louder than people. Her mother was growing stronger these days. She embroidered stitches on coarse canvas that looked like raindrops. She said she was thinking about sin and how long it had weighed on her heart. She said that now it was like burnt ashes scattered in the garden. She said she didn't know if it was right, but she felt lighter. Late one evening, someone knocked on the door. The secretary was standing on the threshold. He said he wanted to give Agatha a tiny thing, the pen he had used to write her name in the book by the river. He said it didn't change anything, but he wanted her to have something other than the earth in her hands. He said he had always been afraid to speak, but now he understood that silence was participating in someone else's work. He said he was grateful to her for showing him how to speak without shouting. He left, and it was quiet in the darkness. In the spring, Lothar returned. He kept his promise and brought not only salt, but also a couple of sacks of flaxseed. He said that the county now pays on time, and that the debt book is balanced. He said he kept the old note about a personal loan from the past, and that it had been paid off for good, with a new agreement between the Count and Agatha. He said the entry contained a simple word: honesty. Hugo, meanwhile, sat in the tower. He did not repent. He said he did what he could. He said that people were ungrateful. He said that the Count was weak. But it didn't matter anymore. His house in the lower town became a workshop where they dyed fabric and learned not to mix printing ribbon with laundry rags. Roland taught his students. He said that color loves order, and that it is like salt. The Count sometimes visited the laundry. He did not try to talk for long. He brought paper with a new note on it, about the castle's obligation to provide the laundry with dry firewood in winter. He left the paper and left. Agatha took the paper and put it on the shelf. That was enough for her. People in the valley talked for a long time about how the laundress turned the court into a confession of the nobility. They did not talk about miracles. They listed the details: the black ribbon, the half-sun, the spoon with etched water, the polished stone by the bath, the scar on the dyer's finger, the abbot's teacher's bottle, Jean's water trap. They said that the ending did not come out of nowhere, but from what everyone had seen but had not put together. They said that justice came not in the cloak of heroes, but in the apron of work. Agatha continued washing. She sometimes looked up at the gate, where a board with burnt marks hung. She knew that the board was not a shield against all misfortunes, but now there was a custom in the valley to count together, not one by one. It was their new order, and if someone asked who had helped the most, people argued. Some said it was the merchant with the papers, because he had resources and arrived at the right time. Others said it was John, because at the right moment he turned water into a weapon and led people without shouting. Others said it was the Countess, because she gave the key at the wrong moment and returned it at the right moment. But many, especially the women by the river, said that attention had won. To the stains, to the seams, to the smell, to the numbers next to the half-sun. They said this calmly, as one might talk about a clean sheet of cloth. The next time the wind touched the ropes in the yard and the black ribbon moved on the hook, Agatha did not flinch. She knew it was just a ribbon. She knew that the banner was folded up in the guardhouse. She knew that if black reappeared in her life, it would not be like a sudden thunderclap, but like a series of simple things that could be seen if one did not rush. So a brief memory remained in the county. How a laundress with skilled hands and an even voice gathered the threat from everyday details and dismantled it back into those same details. About how an underestimated young man turned out to be the one who stopped the blood with water. About how a stranger with paper authority intervened and changed the course of events with one decision. About how a hidden kinship ceased to be a secret and became simply a point in a record, giving no rights, but providing clarity. About how the black banner at the gate was not a curse, but an honest sign of trouble. And about how final justice came from the choices of people who did their job and did not appear by miracle. May this memory be like a smooth seam, without fancy words, but strong. And may your hands remain firm and your eyes attentive. Have a pleasant evening and peace of mind. Right where you listen to this story, I will read every comment.